I'm Charlotte. I'm director of Porter Gallery at our sister Rush Gallery in Chelsea. If you guys have any questions about the gallery at any point after the talk, feel free to come up to me and we'll talk in a few minutes. I'm so honored to have this exhibition here at Porter Gallery. It's such a treat to have this amazing curator, Mel Solomon, also the founder of Prism Art Fair Miami, and she was able to bring together this exhibition, bring it to New York. And we have three of the artists participating in this panel discussion today. And I'm just so thrilled that they're here, and I think we're going to all have a great time. And that's all I'm going to say. So, here you go. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. As Charlotte said, my name is Mel Solomon. I'm founder of Prism Art Fair in Miami, and I also work for an organization called Community Development Corporation. I curated this exhibition mostly in response to a number of recent current events that we've heard about in the news, like beginning in December, and actually an extension of a number of events that have been happening in the past maybe two to 3 years. There's been a lot of resurgence of issues around, I guess, not oppression, but violence against Black males and injustices against Black people in general. And so I felt that curating an exhibition like this would be a peaceful way of addressing the issue, and we're addressing it artfully. And I generally like curating shows around socially impactful issues and kind of highlighting in a very poignant way issues that are important to all of us, not just as a highlight of Black identity, but something that should resonate across racial lines. And that's actually a cornerstone of the curatorial statement, that this is a problem that affects all of us on a human level, not just as a function of us being Black or white or Asian or whatever. All of the artists in this exhibition, to some degree, deal with politics or Black politics. And I made the show after Wesley's piece, which is called Black America, which is a large piece that you see behind us. And originally, when I spoke to all the artists, I was talking to them about creating a show that was focused on using wood as a medium, the foundation for the exhibition as a medium. And my reasoning for that was that this country was built on the foundation of wood and as a material, and most of our older architectural structures that built some of our governmental buildings that were the basis for the political infrastructure of our nation were built with wood. And so I thought it would be interesting to have that as a medium. And so you'll see a lot of the work in this space that are actually made of wood. That's the basis for the actual pieces. But then beyond that, when you go into the corridor space, there's more photographic pieces and illustrations that speak to the curatorial narrative of the exhibition. So I felt it would be a lot more poignant to let the artists talk about the different pieces that you see in the exhibition and how their work relates to the conversation that we're trying to discuss here. So I'll start it off with Wes, because the show is actually named My Black America after the comments piece. So what was your motivation for the impetus for you creating the piece? Why is it made the way it's made? But give us a little background on how you made it and why you actually decided to make the piece.
So, hello everyone. So the first thing, as far as the impetus for this piece being created, was Barack Obama's presidency. And when he first came into office, everyone, was celebrating and doing, portraits of him and doing pieces in honor of his presidency. And I wanted to do something as well, but I knew I didn't want to do a portrait or So it was, so essentially, I wanted to create a piece that actually dealt more around what it meant for us as a Black people, and kind of feeling like I was making both a monument and tribute to his presidency, but also to us as a people, and kind of staking our claim on this country. And so the first one, I had to dismantle it due to some of the construction issues. And so when Mikhail mentioned this exhibition, I always wanted to rebuild it and rebuild it bigger and rebuild it proper. And so this one here is 16 feet by 10 feet. And also in the course of building this one, I was trying to figure out what exactly was the, I guess, what's the current motivation behind the piece and current thinking, as the first one was kind of his entering his presidency, and now this one at the stage where we're kind of exiting the presidency. And along with thinking about the current events of what's going on in the world and what have you. And I find that the idea of My Big Black America for me was almost like a power token. No matter what's going on, the oppression, etc., the violence against us, I can still think of something and I know that there's something built that represented us and that I can kind of draw on that expresses our statement, holding and claim on this country still. And the first one was built with all stained black wood, whereas this one has different finishes to it, slightly varying finishes. Some of spray paint, some of latex paint, some are still staining, which kind of, for me, was the idea of just contrasting some of the various natures of blacks in this country that have we come together. Some pieces are old, have more, some pieces are newer as far as the freight or whatever they're built from. Again, just kind of speaking more to the variety of us, whether it's the younger generation, older generation, and also something that kind of came to mind, and that also kind of helped drive this idea, was thinking that someone mentioned to me that, and I hadn't considered this, that there are 7-year-old kids right now that know nothing but a black president. And I thought that was like amazingly powerful, because for them it's the norm. For us it was like, for me growing up, rappers would talk about black presidents as like it could never happen. It was just like, I never thought it was going to happen, And so, but for them, like as a generation of kids that know nothing but this idea of a black president, or not even an idea, it's reality for them. And for me, like my daughter was born under a black president. My next child will be born under a black president. And for me, like that means something. And I haven't even fully, grasp it fully, but I just know there's a pride there. There's a history in the news that somehow is kind of being used in speaking there. I think that was it. Okay. Back at you.
I think so. I think that was a pretty thorough expression of what you're trying to achieve. And I like that you discussed how for for the youth of today, contemporary America, this is what is their reality, and this is a conversation about the diversity of our country. That our country is not just black, it's not just white, but it's a compendium of all these really amazing pieces. And that is the black experience is part of that conversation. And it's a positive part of the conversation. And that's something too that I want people to also understand about the exhibition is that, a lot of the artists who are in the show, it's a blend of artists, it's a diverse group of artists. So we have a black photographer, we had a Jewish illustrator, and so they're all speaking about these issues that affect black people, and so this is a conversation that's not just localized and it's being presented by black people, but it's something that people from all parts of society understand the importance and how these things that are happening are affecting
The book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, came out written by Rebecca Sweet. I think I'm pronouncing that. Sweet, thank you. And I went out, I was like, I was so enthralled, I was so just energized by the idea of this woman's cells just pirating cellular research and scientific research, the basis for it. Then I went out and bought the book, and I was like, I'm going to do a show, I'm going to do it. They said that about this. I got the book, and it was so, the first couple of pages, I had to put it back down. So I put it back down for a while. Then, Mikhail said, you know, we're going to do this show, it's going to be about perspective in terms of the Black culture in general, and the contemporary context. I'm like, okay. And she's like, yeah, we'll work with wood. I'm like, all right, so let's see how I put that in. And then I decided, I was walking one day from teaching yoga, and I came across these 3 branches. We had decided that I was going to do whatever I was going to do. I needed to do 3 pieces. So I walked upon these 3 branches, and I said, oh, okay, wood. And that me, I love to recycle. Recycling is a very intricate part of my work. So I said, that's what they're there for. I picked up those branches, put them in my car, and decided that was going to be the basis for my work. And then the branches themselves, they represent the actual cells of Henrietta Lacks. The one in the middle was called the sugar icing of Henrietta Lacks. And the sugar icing is referring to the type of, it's a nickname for the type of cancer that she had. Then the one on the left and the right, those are representative of her DNA. And for me, working with fiber is parallel to how I look at the body, because we have, you know, fibrous parts of our body in terms of our muscles, in terms of our brain, and that connection is some of what funnels my love for fabric. So the text that you see is a mixture of 3 different things. One, facts about her life, her actual life, and then specific details about her treatment in terms of her cancer treatment at Johns Hopkins. And then the third is there's a poem that I wrote called Think Black. And it was basically my call to myself and other Black people that I know to not run away from Black, not run away from who we are. And one of the things that I say in this poem is close your eyes, feel Black, be Black, you are it, it is you. Stop being afraid of it. And I'm saying this to myself as I was saying it to other people, because there are times where, you know, we are pushed to, at least I feel, we are pushed to not love our Blackness. And that was the whole poem. So I merged those 3 things. And I was worried when I was doing this. Actually, this is the first time I've actually dealt with text, because I'm a textile artist, working with fabric. And so this was the first time I incorporated text in my work. I was all nervous about it, but I can say that although I'm proud of my work, period, I'm very proud of the way that this came together. And of course, created this show. So I got more to say, but I'm sure I think that answered pretty much good.
And let me ask you one more question. What is the significance of you alternating between? Is there any significance of alternating between Black canvas and white canvas? And is there any specific reason why you chose the textiles that you have chosen to create the different furnitures for each of them?
Well, because I knew it was going to be 3 different pieces and in totality of installation, I was playing with the justification of the black canvas, and then white text, and then white canvas with black text. And it is, I'm talking about race in this. And then I'm talking about our DNA, which is innate in all of us, regardless of the color of our skin. So I'm pushing and pulling with that in terms of on an aesthetic level, but then on a human level, in terms of the colors, and in terms of being black and white, playing juxtaposition of black and white. Yeah.
we have the knowledge of things. So if I have the flu and I come up and I give you a hug and a kiss, and I don't know I have the flu, my bad. But if I have the flu and I know I have the flu, and I come up and give you a hug and a kiss, that's evil. That's mitigating your responsibility as a human being. And so what we have is, poison, aspects of poison. We take poison in the form of alcohol or sunlight or cigarettes or bad food and such, and that's cool. But there's also types of poison like emotional poison, informational poison, that is affecting a lot of our youth, because I teach a lot to inner city kids and such, and they're getting a lot of informational poison from media, and it really is murdering their self-esteem, and it's murdering their ambition, and this is affecting them from the cradle to the grave. And so I thought the question to myself, would you just allow anybody to watch a dog that you didn't know? Go ahead, watch the dog. Or would you let anybody just raise your child? Hey, I don't know you from Adam, but here's, take care of my kid. But we're doing that, we're abrogating responsibility oftentimes by letting not only TV, media, other people feed this particular poison. And when I sat down and talked with some of my students, a lot of the female ones participating, I asked them questions. I said, all right, close your eyes. All right, close your eyes. And think of a white person. Think of what do you see? And they were like, say for a white man. They said he's blonde, he's got blue eyes, he's got a suit on, he kind of looks like Mitt Romney, all this other stuff. And I said, well, close your eyes and think of a white woman. What do you see? Well, she's blonde, she's blue eyes, she has a dress on, and this was 100%, these are kids from all walks of life. And I said, well, close your eyes, think of a black man. What do you see? And they're like, well, he's got a t-shirt on, a wife beater, he's got, his pants are sagging, he's dark skinned, he's this. And I'm like, all right, think of a black woman. And they're like, well, she's got straight hair, she's got tight clothes, she kind of looks like Beyonce. And these are the images, and I'm like, half of these kids' parents, who are good parents, go to work every day in a suit and tie and are educated and what have you, but they're getting all the information from all the wrong sources. People aren't sitting down with them and saying, hey, this is where you come from, this is what you can have. And so I did this aspect over here as a glimpse in the mirror. I took one of the girls and I said, all right, what are the things that you don't like about yourself? What are the things? And she talked about weight and talked about her skin complexion, all these things. And I said, what did you see in the mirror? And what could I have you see? And so I made this, I guess, reflection on possibilities for her, for a future that could be anything. Place yourself in there. Look at what I can see you as. And I put that crack in the mirror because, how many of us have actually a mirror that's all cracked and broken? Not many of us. That really determines kind of class. If somebody does like this is all I got, this is the only thing I have to look into. And so when you look at that, you might see a gold frame, but that's part of the illusion too. That's part of her I guess, imagination, her possibilities and such. And so I wanted her to not be looking at me in the portrait, but to be looking at herself and me observing that very personal moment from behind her own eyeballs. And so that's why that piece, is titled that particular aspect, the cognitive ones. Not just looking and saying, oh, I got Elsa Versace, but look at yourself. But not just look at yourself, look at the possibilities of yourself. And understand that stands alone from what anybody else is telling you about yourself. Right? This particular piece is Soldier. And I did this one for this because it's about wood as well. And that frame, unless you really look at the frame, I carved that frame, I drilled it, I added, I guess semblances of bullet holes to it and such. Because it's not necessarily just about that soldier, it's about personal battles and wages and fights that black men have to deal with on a daily basis. I chose my brother, my blood brother, as the model for it because he battles with addiction and he constantly is in a fight for his own life. You know, he's constantly waging war, not only with himself, but with outside forces, you know. But I also thought about, my grandfather in the service, my father in the service, and how they were treated when they came back, and that's why I have the medals more so bigger than any cat saying, all right, you deserve this because we say you are an excellent person or whatever. No, I put medals that are obvious and right in the face nooses that represent, all those who, were not, I guess, given their medal about their Purple Heart, And you swing it from the tree and somebody says, all right, throw them in the hole, cover it up, and that's it. I did this piece also, I revisited it because I went to my alma mater, I went to a military school down in Virginia, and one of the teachers took me out to a slave burial ground, and we went way up in the hills, and these tombs had nothing on, they were just rocks. First they had poor people's tomb, and it was like 1800s and like 1826, 1815, and they're shale, and people etched them in. Those people had really crappy graves and shale stuff. You could tell that they were poor. But further in the woods, where the people weren't even considered human beings, and those particular tombs were just rocks, and if you just didn't know, you would just stumble over them. But you could see that there's symmetry, And every time I do a portrait like this, and especially when there's an omission of history, I try to make that history come alive and say, all right, place yourself in this portrait. When you stand in front of this portrait, don't just look at the person. Look at that person and try to put yourself in their shoes and place yourself in that portrait. And one more thing on this. I showed this one time in Virginia Beach, and this little girl comes up to me, a little white girl, about 13 years old, and could not leave the picture, just kept standing in front of it. Their parents were like, come on, let's go. And she's like, he's so beautiful. He's so beautiful. And I'm like, wow, I have amounts of age that she doesn't even see race yet. And if we could all be that innocent or have the opportunity to be that innocent, one more thing, when we were talking about this, somebody who wants to represent me wrote something in my book and said, because they're trying to get me not to be so forward with my communication of my blackness, trying to get me not to take responsibility for the things that I see and want to express that. To say, we're going to paint a black person, just paint a black person, let it be that. Don't put your, personal, opinions and stuff. And they said, I'm an artist who happens to be black, but my race doesn't define me. That's what they said on it. And I'm like, even if I believe that, which I know, but even if I did, society at large will remind me every day of that fact and of that imbalance. And it's what I do with that information, it's what I do with that knowledge that makes me a better artist or a better communicator.
So I'm like so pleased to be working with each and every one of the artists on this panel. And unfortunately, some of the artists that are in the show are not able to be here. Someone from Miami, like T.L.E. Mansa, whose work, he's an extraordinary artist, and he mostly deals with, he does his work mostly in acrylic as his media, but he actually departed from acrylic for this show because have actually been incarcerated, but not as felons, but on misdemeanor charges. And, they were actually erroneously in prison. So he just kind of created a bit of a monument to his brothers, who are now, outside of their living in society. But this is just a comment on, the demands, the unfortunate demands that are placed on some African males in society. And then in the corridor outside, and if you haven't seen the corridor space yet, I wanted to encourage you to do that. There are illustrations from Jim Moran, who is the Miami Herald Pulitzer Prize winning illustrator, who has illustrated some really amazing touchstones in the recent history of America that have affected, global African diaspora folks. Like Nelson Mandela, for instance, came to Miami a couple years ago. I think in the 90s, in 1996. And historically, diplomats who come to Miami are given, the key to the city. And Nelson Mandela, who is no Peace Prize winner, was given a key to the city of Miami, which I thought was a little bizarre. So that illustration is in the corridor, as well as a conversation about Black males and homosexual relationships that they're given the right to marry, but they're not. They still don't necessarily have the right to vote. So those are like the kind of issues that are dealt with in the illustrations out in the corridor. There's a lovely image by Pablo Martinez Montevez, who's a photographer for the White House, and it's a beautiful image, almost a deified image of President Barack Obama. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look out there, please do. And if you have any questions for the artist or for myself, please now is the time to ask.
Does everybody know who the Red Black is? Yes, I nod, so no.
Because you told me. Because of the show. I didn't know.
I heard on NPR one night, driving around.
Okay. Okay, so just a quick snippet, also because we're recording this. So Henrietta Lacks was born in 1920. She died in 1951, I believe. And she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She was getting her treatment from Johns Hopkins. And Johns Hopkins during that period of time, and many other hospitals in the U.S. in general, were known for not fully treating patients, and specifically African American patients that were part of that board. And because they were part of that board, they were treated with care for free. Now, some of the scientists believe that because of that, because they were getting care for free, that they can then in turn experiment on them. So when she was diagnosed, they literally sent her back home at one period. They wouldn't even acknowledge that she had that her cancer was as far as it was at one period. And another practice that was happening during that time, and it's still happening, just blew my mind as I was reading and researching about her, is that when you have some sort of something removed or some type of procedure, and they take a part of your body, cell, or whatever to be tested, they don't just dispose of those things, they keep them. And so what happened is that they took part of her cancer cell, and what they realized was that her cells were immortal. They basically did not die, whereas other people's cells do. And so her cells became what they call the workhorse of cellular science, basically. It's created a multi-billion industry on cell reproduction. And it's a linking for material fertilization, the polio vaccines, testing whether it came from how rubber affects human beings to how radiation affects human beings. So her cells, a black or regulating a cell production industry. But wait, and her family is not benefiting from this magnificent part of our scientific history, and not just African American, the world over. And her family is not being compensated for this. In fact, it wasn't until the 1970s when the doctors started to call her family. And really, they were calling because they wanted to know if their kids had the same cells as Malcolm did. They weren't calling because they wanted to inform her of what her mother's cells had done to the rest of the world. So I wanted to make sure I got that out. Get that out. Yeah, because it's extremely important.
What she's saying about how important it is, just for perspective, there are strains of corn that you can't plant in the ground because Monsanto or ADA, that Archer Daniel Midland, owns the DNA strains. And you have to pay them just to plant that corn in your yard. And if you have it, they can sue you and get paid. They don't pay her family using her DNA in perpetuity, but those two standards aren't the same.
And there are over 11,000 patents that are in reference to the HeLa line, which is Henry Lac's cell line. 11,000, and none of them have to do with her. There's something wrong with that. So for me, this made sense when we're talking about the foundation of the U.S. and the African American influence and work and blood, sweat, and tears. And look at what this woman put into her life. And she, this was an individual. She loved her family. So it really touched me, moved me. So,
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you all for being here. Wes, I'm curious about the placement of certain objects, if you will. Like, particularly, maybe those are knots of wood. Are there any particular, are there particularly reference point for those? Maybe significance on particular placement? Just curious.
So, my background is primarily painting and printmaking and such. And so for me, much of my placement kind of comes from just a visual balance of elements and texture. So, for instance, the knots, the knots are kind of just a kind of place to move your eye about, as well as in similar ideas with the, whether it's the kind of more furniture-like pieces or like the bark, kind of just really just to keep your eye moving.
I thought maybe they reference particular moments in history or conflicts, recent conflicts maybe. That's what
They do if you think so. They do. But I mean, so that's the other thing about the piece for me is, which I thought to say afterwards, was that there's no specific agenda with this piece for me other than what it means for me personally. I want others to kind of come to it how they come to it and see it. But yeah, so for me, like, there is no wrong with how you come to it.
It was more just a visual fact.
Yeah, for me, it's about placement and visual, balance. I'm not going to pick them up.
My position is like more of a general question for everyone, and some of our have had a chance to talk to, but I don't know if everyone has. I think we'll hear a little bit more about like you just mentioned, thinking and teaching background, and maybe about some other works in this exhibition also. And I would hear you just talk about those a little bit, and then also talking maybe a little bit about what your work was in your brain for these newer pieces, and then if you have any upcoming that we should be aware of, or kind of what's next on the art making universe.
So, as far as some of the other work for me, so part of my practice kind of deals with this idea of creating fictional artifacts. And so you have this kind of lived, distressed life life of these works. And in my, for me, as I'm creating them, I build them around a narrative that's kind of coming about in my head as I'm building. And when in the gallery, I kind of want you all to think of that in that sense of, well, where does this end? What's the life and history and story behind the work? So for instance, the Target 456 specifically for me dealt with the idea of being a target and feeling like a target as a young black male in this country. And from that piece, like a whole series is born from that, which actually originated from a line of one of Kendrick Lamar's songs where he's saying, hoping to see 21. And the idea of that being a very real, hope for me when I was young. I mean, that, to see the age of 21 was, you might as well be talking about seeing the age of 80 or 100 when you're 16 and thinking about that for some reason. And I thought, for us in this country, that's a terrible goal. You know what I mean? To only see the age of 21, that's a terrible goal. We should be thinking way beyond. But the reality is, I was constantly seeing incidents on TV where you hear, so-and-so, great got good grades, he was scholarship to so-and-so school, and, killed random act of violence, blah, blah, blah. And so, so that was kind of the impetus for that work. The piece Altered has this big box here, has several layers to it as far as in this creation process. Again, the same impetus of the idea of creating these fictional artifacts where, for me, I envisioned this as having once been something that was carried in a safari, that you would see these trunks being carried. I actually saw a trunk in Restoration Hardware that I wanted, and then made me think, from there, this idea of some other ideas I've been mixing, and so there's kind of a hybrid of these, both real objects and fictional ones that I create. But so this idea, this trunk that is being carried through, some safari, and every night, they set up their big tents and, everything's pulled out. And I imagine this being set up, and then, once everyone is, leaves the tent, the guy opens it or whatever, and, does whatever the worship or what have you involved with that piece once it's open. And for me, then, it was tossed out, it was set aside, it was lost, it was looted. And so that's why the inside doesn't have any physical objects to it. But then, later, scrawled with these beautiful graffiti writings, but the outside was left clean because of the words, the names Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael, which essentially, from my studies, you have Abraham. From Abraham, came Ishmael, and from Ishmael you have the line in which Islam is born. From Isaac you have Judaism and Christianity is born. And this idea of these, this family, yet, there's these religious wars, etc., that have been happening for years, but yet they all worship the one God of Abraham. And so that idea of, these names, there's a reference to them, a respect as far as why it was not tagged on the outside. This is all my imagining, while I'm making the piece. This is my narrative that I'm kind of building as it's coming about. So it's almost like this spiritual descendants, the spiritual lineage, as far as the interior part, wanting to be associated with these names, wanting to be associated with these names, these kings, essentially, of their spiritual religions. And it also kind of relates to how in the Bible, you have so-and-so got so-and-so. There's a list of names of people's lineage. And so that's kind of how I see the interior of that as well, is this idea of lineage, these crews, these families that come, and over time, that's why it's layered on top of layered. And you see this out in space, out in public spaces where people have just, you don't know how many years of graffiti and tagging has gone, and how many people have traveled and seen and touched this wall, and yet, and touched this particular box, and yet this outside is still revered and kept clean, and that's just kind of one part of it. There's actually several more there, just that it's kind of like complicated, what have you. But and then the last piece in the back with the numbers 250 Bronson, what's it entitled New York, New York, deals with the stop and frisk policies that were happening or taking place, and those numbers are the 685,721 or 24, are how many people were stopped in the year. I think these are the numbers from 2012, and so that's how many people were stopped and frisked that year. 87% were Black and Latino, which is the 87 on the top and bottom, and you would have to do like 1,878, I think it says, people a day in order to get to that number. So that's how many people were stopped daily in New York during 2012, I believe it was, with that stop and frisk policy. And so that's when you just seeing those numbers kind of laid out like that was crazy and amazing to me at the same time. And I don't think people realize, like people are experiencing it, but when you experience it so personally, you don't realize just the scale in which it's taking place. Like you're talking about over 500,000 people, in a year are being stopped and frisked, just random. So yeah, anyway, that's just Oh, so yeah, coming up, we have a show. We and Amber and I and our collective have a show in the Delusions of Grandeur Collective. Have a show coming up in the fall at Encore Gallery in DC. That would be September 4th. It's the reception.
How we love to see.
Yeah, How We Love DC. Okay, I think that's the first thing. Last thing.
Okay, so, like I said earlier, I'm a textile artist, so it's media, installation, sculpture, and public art. And this is definitely the first time that I'm using text in my work. And I am definitely going to continue doing that. I do see myself doing more pieces in this nature to finish off, because I'm not necessarily finished yet. I have some more things I'd like to say related to the story. And just overall, in terms of my work, I mentioned that recycling is a very important issue for me. I really think part of the issues that we have in general in our world is that we have not figured out how to counterbalance what we use and then how we put it back into the universe. From the remedial things, cup, plastic, curling iron. And so part of what I do is I then put those things back into my work, and I want you, of course I want you to see it as art, but then I want the person to be able to examine it a little bit more, look into how we use, how we reuse, how we misuse the things in our environment. But then one of the other important things that I focus on, that I want people to get out of my work, is my love for color. Color means the world to me. I don't know how I would live, if I winter is so hard for me, without light and color. We all, whether we acknowledge it or not, we are drawn to and we derive from the energy from the colors in our environment. And then I definitely have some serious womanist or feminist views about our life and the society that we live in. So all of my work literally has something to do with womanhood and what I think is an imbalance in our society between masculine and feminine energy. And so for me, the foundation of my work is usually rope, chicken wire, a metal form, canvas or wood. And then I take objects that have color and or that have masculine, mostly feminine. Part of that's because you guys, they don't give you a whole lot of options in your color scheme then I weave them back into the wood, the matrix, the chicken wire as kind of a representation of what, not what I think we're not doing as well as we should with the balancing of our masculine and feminine energy. So shows. I have a show coming up called Personal Patterns, and that's a group show. It'll be at Montgomery College in DC. Then another group exhibition at Stamp Gallery. And that's going to be pretty interesting because that's going to be celebrating, what was the name of that group? Spiral. The group Spiral, the academic group Spiral. So we're going to be in relationship to that historic African-American artistic group. And then after that is how we left how we lost DC. Yeah. So that's the next couple of months. So.
Take a little bit more background of have you always been portrait, how you working with portraits?
Well, I've always, liked to do figurative work. I think as a kid, I learned mathematical lessons from comic books, which was really not, realistic. But I always did portraiture, and I think I started going down the path I was going when, because I always just taught, the inner city classes, like the Fresh Air Fund with Mariah Carey, and the Smithsonian Institute, and the Young Association Program, and all these other, aspects of teaching, inner city and at-risk youth. And so I was doing a museum tour one time, and all the kids were just really, they were like, we don't see anybody that looks like us. We're seeing these paintings are nice, but, were we not a part of history? Did we not matter? What's up? They're very candid about expressing it. So I was like, you're right, And so I wanted to do experimentation on people's psyche by doing paintings that were taken out of historical context and flipping the switch. So I put a lot of females in Victorian and Elizabethan and garb aspects with a lot of symbolism, which you talk about symbolism, a lot of it, where it's supposed to be a flower is a skull, but the skull is more representational of transformation and how we deal with change and such. And so I also was studying the importance of portraiture throughout history. Now, in art history class in college, they're trying to stay awake, looking in the dark, writing down, trying to look at the slides. And so they come across this cat, and I'm like, oh, who's the brother? And they were like, what are we talking about, black? No, it's a black guy right there. Who is that? It was Alessandro de Medici. But they were like, black, yeah, look. The APB went out, and black guy, straight up. And, so tell me, what's up? Who's this cat? They were like, well, it's, just the Duke of Florence and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but, who are his parents? What's up? And so I had to do my own research to find out his mother was Seminary de Campeche. And his father turned out to be Pope Clement IV at some point. Now, she was a servant girl and were a slave over there, but, it wasn't like, like in the Deep South, it wasn't like, straight up dehumanizing whips and chains and not even, a dog. It was like, all right, you're a slave, but, have some finery, take care of stuff. And, when when he vetted her, which who knows if it was rape or not, he gave the child his name and his money and his title. He was like, well, I'm going on a bigger and better thing, but, you hold your stuff down. But there's portraits of him all over the place. There's portrait, yeah, but none of his mother. She didn't read a portrait. He didn't exist if he didn't have a portrait. And his children were painted out of history. Julia de Medici was so vocal about being a woman, and they also said about being black, that they painted her out of history until she was discovered in 1964 in Philadelphia Museum by my interpretation, because she was a Moor. They called Alessandro the Moor. And so I did the anthropological search and everything. And from there, I wanted to even deal with more, I guess, quasi-historical aspects, things that are like from fantasy, like, what if, slavery didn't exist? What if, this, the hierarchy was different? What if, and see what those portraits would look like. And a lot of my portraits just deal with the giving a different set of value. Like, if you do black art, oftentimes it's devalued and put into this aspect of saying, okay, this is wrong because you're doing images of black people. This has less value. Like saying, okay, Norman Lewis is less valuable, not even just because he used to do some figurative black images, but because he is black. When he started the abstract expressionist movement with de Kooning and Pollock and all those guys, sat at the same table, talked about the same stuff, and his work is valued at a fraction of the cost. A couple 100,000 versus a couple million, like 100 million. And you can't tell me that that's not just because of race. And so when people, look at it and say, and it challenges their notions of class, challenges notions of beauty, that's what I want. That's my impetus. I want people to challenge their own notions. If I put somebody in a kente cloth and said that they're an African queen, they're like, okay, right? That doesn't challenge any expectations. I want people to, a lot of people are accidentally racist. They'll come up and be like, well, he's so well spoken. You're pretty for a black guy. Well, all these things, and they don't realize that they're saying it, and I want them to have that same period of discomfort when they're like, wow, she's, I'm surprised that she's pretty. I'm surprised that she's got money. I'm surprised that, such and such. I want them to come up with those thoughts by accident in their head and challenge their own notions of it. So that's all. I like to paint. I like to just do classical painting. I like to challenge with light and composition. I do all sorts of things too, but, we're supposed to eat the same food every day as artists. But I'm sure any artist in here is like, give me some wood, I'm gonna make something, give me some silk, we'll have fun. Anything what we would like to just create, but we have to say, okay, this is our consistency. So that's that. I've been exhibiting for a while for the other aspect. I've been doing a lot of exhibits, so I'm stopping now because I'm building more on a new body of work. So I got a new studio. The studio's in Richmond, Virginia. I got a new 2,000 square foot joint, and I'm just painting and painting and painting. And speaking of shows, I have a show that I'm nervous about. That's on 6-7 years ago. I was an art therapist in a hospital, and I was burning myself out dealing with pediatric hematology, oncology, infectious diseases. Watching kids die and holding their hands and helping them deal with brain injury and brain tumor and disease by painting. And after 5 years, that stuff was like, it's an emotional drain. And even after I stopped doing it, I still had patients. I still saw them. I still went to funerals. And, so it doesn't stop. And so, but I was blessed. I felt blessed. These kids handle this kind of demise with so much dignity, more so than adults do. And so it was just something that was beautiful, but it was also, I couldn't go home and paint. I go home and I'm emotionally tired, spiritually tired. I couldn't, so I tried out for some TV show up here just to get away, and I got called back, and then I went down and I shot this reality TV show in Miami, and it was really weird and a lot of stuff went wrong, but I was like, hey, I'm out of the hospital and I'm, a couple of months in a hotel in Miami and I'm chilling. And nothing happened afterwards. So 6 years later, I get an email saying, hey, it's going on the air. I'm like, oh, crap. I don't know what. So the first show came on, I missed it because I'm up here, but it came on Saturday on Dish Network, Newsmax or something. doing some other exhibitions in Virginia, New York, and in DC. Most recently at Anacostia. Anacostia? Anacostia Art Center. So I just finished doing a show there, which was cool. Washingtonian magazine, all that stuff. But so I'm not doing anything on the horizon right now. I've gotten some offers, but I'm just focusing on redeveloping, rebuilding my body of work, because sometimes when you have to eat, you sell the principle, and then your body of work goes down, and you're like, I'm not showing. So you gotta resist sometimes. And I hate doing commissions.
Hi. I really enjoyed each of your story. Well, I'm not the American Caribbean, so our background is slightly different. We sort of black and we still go through certain stuff in certain islands. But I thought your part, I would say, when you were young, going to 21, when you think about it, your whole life is still not just able to survive to live 21, right? So after 21, is there another age range now?
So, I thought about that as far as, well, when I made it, like I was already 30 something, 32 or something. And so that idea of, what is that goal now? And so mentally I kind of had to flip this as if it's off my back and now looking forward. And personally, as far as, I don't have that same worry of violence that I had as a teen, because like I'm not around teens being young and dumb, like I was previously. And mind you, the funny thing is, like, I was, a kid from the suburbs, like, not into drugs or anything of that nature. It was just always, happening. And even, so I know even I felt it. But moving forward, I wouldn't say I necessarily have that same fear, or goal of to see a certain age. Now I just want to live, as long as I can, for my kids and see them grow and their kids and, continue to make art and, till I can, it's not that same cap of, man, I can't wait, just hope to see that age 21 like it was well, so.
But it's not that your life is kind of taken out like that, though. It's not like free bird.
Right, yeah, and it's interesting because when that is your goal, then you hit it, and you're kind of like, well, now what do I do? Because I didn't really think past hitting the age of 21. And so I did feel that way, when I was younger, kind of that somewhat, just this kind of lostness of, well, I guess I just keep doing what I've been doing, and, but it wasn't in the same, I wasn't, thinking years ahead of, by the time I'm 40, I want to be, able to see, no, it was because 21 was like, is it that retirement age, what I mean? Like, I can kick my feet back up now and live, because now I'm out of that danger zone, but,
Sorry, I just have one more question. I do portraits, and I find that my biggest credit is when people say, work is nice, the same way you're saying, but what I saying about work, like, it's a lot more to tell, like, the story of it. Sometimes people can't see that. So, like, if I were here at the top, and just see a portrait of a black Wall Street guy that maybe, like, shoot somewhere, I can see that. But then I find it fascinating that when you talk, there's more. But I wonder if that's, for me personally, wondering, is that a problem when you have a long story, but you cannot see all that long story?
It can be, and I'll say this small anecdote is I was at Art Basel, exhibiting, and people came in and were like, I said, "Do you have any questions?" They were like, "No, I got no questions." I said, "Well, I just want to let you know I'm one of the artists, and I have questions. I just lied to your face. I have questions, And so what I showed you can't take the artist away from it. You have to, the art and the artist oftentimes has to people don't even know that there's bullets on that frame. They're not paying attention. They don't look at it, you know, and so the story's gonna be missed on them, just like they're gonna get lost when they drive, because they don't see the signs. And so your responsibility is to do your best to communicate. Sometimes it's gonna be subtle, sometimes it's gonna be in your face. Sometimes it's gonna be personal, so no one else is gonna see it but you. And that's okay, you know, but everybody's gonna come up with their own story for what they see, and it's gonna affect them in a different way, and that's okay too.
So, recently there was a comment made by First Lady Michelle about how museums and libraries and places for African-American children and adults. Do you guys have a comment on that, or particular way you feel about it?
One more time? So say the question one more time, it's a little
Sorry,
louder.
the question is that First Lady Michelle Obama recently made a comment that our museums and galleries and libraries feel welcoming to African American children and adults. Do you guys feel like there's any truth to that, or do you have any comment in reply to that statement?
I'll do one real quick. Two things. One, I used to have to curate art for the hospital, all right? And so our hospital was an inner city hospital, mostly, black people coming in there. And, at that point, they just had people who didn't really, I've heard the comment, I'm not racist, I just don't think about it at all. That is also racism of omission. And so when you don't have imagery of those people that you represent, it's almost like a slap in the face. And so not only did I have to have artwork in there that wasn't like red slashes for people trying to get better, but I had to have artwork in there that represented who was coming into this space. And so if you have a black city like Philadelphia, and these kids are seeing that they don't matter, they might not even be saying, hey, you don't matter. You might as well be saying that. If you don't have representation of anything that even represents the culture, it doesn't have to be their face. It could just be something that speaks to them, through color and such. And so when you don't have black curators, and you don't have black museum directors, and you don't have black people who are in the administrative level that are responsible for putting the work in there, then of course black people are going to be marginalized. They're not going to be they're not going to think about it unless they are. They grow up in that aspect, unless they're, there's people, I have great friends that are curators and they have vision, they see everything, they want to go, they go into Haiti and talk to the artists and stuff, where a lot of black people ain't going down there, and so, if you have people that are open like that aren't afraid to understand the big picture, that's cool, but we need to be represented, and it affects the kids and it even affects the adults.
So I've seen a couple of versions of her talk or whatever. I'm assuming it was originally a long talk, and then it's been broken down and kind of reappropriated. Yes, and then I've seen it in different contexts, which I think is great because what's happened in one of the Facebook versions of, and I posted on my page, and it was one of the ones that was saying that she was being racist or that it was against whatever she said. And it was funny because I got responses from both sides, far left and then far right. But what happened is that there was a dialogue that happened in between. And I definitely think that it's true. When you cannot see representation of your image, of your likeness, of your culture, of your heritage, regardless of who you are, is important. And for African Americans and people of color, it does not happen specifically in the U.S. We are bombarded with then the counter of it. And it begins to wear down your psyche. And it's not just your actual reflection, it's everything that comes along with who you are, who your lineage is, who your mom, your papa, your cousins, all that. When you cannot see yourself in your daily environment, when you walk out, it builds up. So I'm definitely glad that dialogue is happening. And then from my own personal perspective, something that switches. Even when I go into a gala or when I go into a gallery for a talk, and you're the only black person there, or the only black woman there, or you and your person that you came with, other people, or even worse, it's when it's only you, the person you came with, and the staff, the catering staff, and the guards. I just felt like energy right here for me because it still saddens the hell out of me that I can still, in 2015, that I can still do that. And that was, the last time I had that effect was earlier in the year, in the gala last year. And so it builds up. It's just a reality. I mean, I don't want it to be, but it's still, unfortunately, a reality.
I mean, I can continue on. I mean, I was about to say that I think in many ways, you know, even myself now, going down to like the National Gallery of Art, you know, I go now because I now have a different viewpoint of the work that I'm looking at. I'm not, you know, but I also think that's why there's not as many, you don't see as many like young black artists out there, you know, because why go to some place where you're not seeing, you know what I mean? It's kind of just like, you know, the cafeteria when we grew up, like, you know, the blacks are hanging out together, the whites are hanging out together. Well, it's the same thing, it's on a larger scale of art, you know what I mean? Like, there's a big building and it's full of, you know, white folks on the wall, you know, and so you don't really find a reason to go. But see, so now, like personally, like when I go now, I'm looking at different, you know, aspects of composition, etc. Like it's more studying basis. It has nothing to do with the actual images, so to speak. You know what I mean? And because I'm also creative, so I think that, you know, to some degree, if I didn't know a person, an artist as a youth, like one of my homeboys' mother was an artist. And so I grew up seeing her in her studio and her paintings around the house. And that's what kind of like, oh, you mean like what I'm doing here, I can actually keep doing this as an adult, you know what I mean? And it's only, I think, from the act of seeing that around you is what kind of somehow, you know, or your parents kind of purposely feeding it to you in some form of fashion. But like I look in homes now, because I have an art installation business where I go to all the people's homes all the time. And so now when I see, you know, if I see photos of people on Instagram or anything, I'm always looking at the walls. And so many times it's blank walls, you know what I mean? And because so many people grow up with blank walls, you know, like, and so therefore when they get an apartment, they think they're fresh and clean, and they're blank walls, you know? And, you know, it amazes me because I want to put something there. And I grew up with images on my wall. And, you know, my folks were into art, you know, not like on a super scale, they just like having stuff on walls as well. So, you know, all that kind of adds up and combines, I think, to the factors overall.
I wanted to add real quick that I didn't mean to say that, only say that, you know, we do need more black curators, but I don't mean to say that only a black curator would be able to understand, you know, black culture. It takes a person that has experienced the world in a realistic aspect that's interested in art and culture at all levels to say, hey, you know, logically, this is what should be here, this is what should be represented.
Thank you.
I guess I can also add to that. I grew up having dabbled in almost any and every possible artistic form, even ballet, piano, painting, drawing, art, even architecture. And in every single part of my journey, I was always the only, you know, in the group. And but it just I never perceived it as an issue until I got much older and realized, wait a minute, there's something, you know, disproportionate here. You know, why am I the only one in these conversations? And then to some degree, I even started to realize that what I was learning was not necessarily a perspective that was reflective of who I was. I wasn't getting, I had come from Caribbean ancestry, so I wasn't even getting a very strong Caribbean perspective. I wasn't getting a strong Afro-centric perspective. And so I, as an adult, it just became more interesting proud of it because I was raised to conceive those differences. My parents always told me to go anywhere I want to go, and I can do whatever I want to do without feeling any boundary between myself and what I wanted to become. But for many in this country, when the burden can be very, very thick, and they don't necessarily have the leadership that gives them that the feeling that they can kind of overcome to do whatever they want to do, then it could be, they might feel that way. So,
Actually, yeah, I mean, I grew up in this, my family are immigrants, like, I came here when I was 13, I didn't speak any English, so I felt like a minority most of the time too, and my parents always told me, like, that doesn't matter that you don't speak English, you can do whatever you want. But I often find myself in situations like that, where I was the only one in this room that was this way or that way, and I didn't speak English, and like, I lived this way. You can tell that I was from somewhere else, but do you think like these things are happening because of the issue of race and racism in America, or just because there is an interest? I was also never interested in a lot of things that America is interested in. I was never interested in football. I was never interested in softball. So it's just like things that were never present or I never had interest in stuff. Maybe, like art is something that's present in like the family roots and like the history of where you came from, or is it just
I think that's
the issue of racism, that just kind of people in harmony?
But see, the thing is that art is very much so associated with access and class, and a lot of times that can be loosely or very directly related to race. So, if you are socioeconomically in a certain social bracket, and unfortunately, demographics or statistics read that there's a strong I guess, bent towards what am I trying to say? With minorities, there's a lesser association with wealth, for instance, and art is like very much attached to wealth, so you might not necessarily have that relationship with it just because of that, and your parents might not even think of art as an option, like, why am I going to take my kids to a museum? Because they might feel like it's not part of their.
A European perspective or white perspective on art has kept it at a quote unquote this level because they associate it with wealth. Whereas other cultures, it comes in the different brackets, where like in terms of African culture, it comes in as part of your name, part of your inheritance, part of your culture. So, and unfortunately, because we are separated from some of that heritage in some ways, and our socioeconomic space in this country, we have to worry about the light bill versus or pay for school something or rent versus going to an art exhibit. And so it's a lot more complicated than just no interest. And I think one of the most important things is that too many of us are disconnected from our source. Too many of us are disconnected from our creativity. Because art is an extension of who you are, it's an extension of what you want to be, who you think you can be. It's about crafting your energy around you. And too many of us, and art, and I say art, and I mean music, dance, science, math. Art is about your creative gifts. And it shouldn't equal to wealth. For anybody that's doing it, what they love, doesn't always. But it's, for me, in my perspective, it's about the disconnection of ourselves and disconnection to our roots. So there's a lot more to it.
And then additionally too, I think a lot of times the creativity is something that is very much so just rooted in diasporic experience. And many times creating an archive of our existence. And that's exactly how I see art. I see art as an archive of, or a snapshot of wherever we are in that specific framework in history. And that's the reason why I like curating or putting together shows that there's a dialogue about where we are at a particular time. Because if it doesn't do that, then when somebody looks back on this time and they see My Big Black America, if it doesn't talk about where we are locally or in that contemporary moment, then to me it's useless, so.
Say one thing, the notion of art just being aspects of, say, museums or even, high art or fine art, you can't have civilized society without any kind of art. I mean, that's just part of the human condition, from cavemen or what have you. Now, you go down to the deep south, there's not a lot of museums and such, but people produce it as a way of their life. It's called folk art. But now people are putting value to it. And before they used to say, there's no value until I collect enough, and then I can say, hey, there's value. Let me start selling this stuff now. And so it's, it used to be seen from society that, hey, black people couldn't make art because, not, way back in the day, not even that far, slavery wasn't that far back, but that was the thing, if it was came from, it's just an artifact, it's just a craft, it has nothing. So a lot of black cats were painting landscapes like Bannister, so you're like, okay, it's black, you couldn't see it, so the value was different, but now it's mitigated based on that. So you have art, you do art, everybody does art, everybody produces art. You go down to Haiti, they have nothing else, but they have all these areas where people are making art constantly. Now they're not selling a lot, but everybody's making something, everybody's producing something, and that's the aspect of that therapy is that if you have something in you and you need to get it out, it can be your own personal art. It doesn't necessarily have to go on the wall, it doesn't necessarily have to sell for a bunch of money, but that's necessary for your existence.
I have a question. When you just mentioned people showing Black America, I guess each country has their own history and own race history. You mentioned South, South right now, studying North Carolina. I noticed that when people talk about the South, they talk about history and race, they talk about the obvious or talk about the history of that moment. So I wonder that if there's people looking or putting you in a category now, so that this is not Black America. So I grew up watching TV or Black culture on TV, hip hop, Fresh Prince and Martin Luther King and so forth. So I was wondering in this show and when you're talking, do you think that people kind of predicting there's a Black man and a Black woman and a Black creator, this is what we will get, obviously Black American culture? Do you think people kind of expect to see the same song? I mean, the same story, so that I can't explain it, how this is literally Black America. Why not different color? What I mean? I wonder if we put ourselves in a box sometimes to kind of show or something. I wonder if that's always a good thing. What I mean? Not being cruel or anything, but even other are being anything that we have to express where we're from because people have a stereotype or perception. So I wonder if you're putting perception or being obvious with it or not obvious with it. Do you put yourself in this box?
Let me answer the question. My personal reason, and I purposely was like, me and Russ talked about it, and he told me at this place. And egregious to call My Big Black America. I said, there's absolutely under no circumstances anything wrong with that. We are a part of this country. There's no, I don't think there should ever be any difficulty in us talking about who we are I felt all of that, it was almost too immediately address that issue. It was like, we're gonna obviously walk through this door. And I was waiting for somebody to ask that question. You know, I was like, we're gonna immediately address this issue with the title. And then, you know, if it comes up in conversation, then it's something we can discuss even further. But for me, it's not, I'm not comfortable with talking about claiming it. And I'm not comfortable about it being very, very clearly stated because it shouldn't be an issue as far as I'm concerned.
Let me say something. When I heard the name of Black America, so what came to my mind was I think that's totally okay for a show. Why? Because whenever I'm from there, and back home we always hear America is a white place. White place. How could America be a white place when the people who built this land are immigrants? A lot of them are Africans, a lot of them came from Asia and so on. Not related to white much. Blacks and other people, right? So I think that that name is totally good for the show. You know, that's my main point. Back home, we have racism problems. And the problem is the same brown skin color, but the hair texture is different. Right? I have a problem with them, with that. The guy said both parties have the same color, so if you have the same color, you're black. Why do you have to be so stupid? But I have straight hair, and you got kinky hair. Because you got kinky hair, you black. I got straight hair, I'm not black. That's not stupidity. You just an idiot. Why are you different? So that's the problem. Today I had a post on Facebook. What is the meaning? What's the difference between race and ethnicity? I had to post a long essay pertaining to that. Because we recently had elections, and the problem came up with you police, you this. It's absolute nonsense. Where are we heading? It's just like the whites and the blacks. You know, it's same nonsense again.
And really the whole issue of race, in my mind, has always been a ridiculous conversation. Like Ross mentioned earlier, you know, when we're children, it's not something, when my friends when I was a child were random yet, it was never an issue to me, and it only became this big issue when I started, or I even only started to receive race as an adult, like literally as an adult. I was naive enough to avoid it until I was about 21. And then when I started working in the workplace, I was like, well, holy shit, like, I'm being discriminated this way. I was like, why is she giving me the coffee? Why do I have to go get the coffee? You know, I'm just as, you know, bright and have just as much zeal and tenaciousness as anybody else, but for some reason I could never really grasp the idea until I had to grasp it and address it as an adult. So race for me has always been a foolish dynamic.
I see it as a tribal mindset thing.
Right.
That's what I see.
Let me say something real quick. Here in America, for better or worse, and literally we're all in the same boat. Right? You go to say South Africa, they got the colors and they got the black. You know, in America, you know, you're gonna get drawn on whether you light skin or dark skin or whatever, because it's an economic aspect. You know, in my family, that's my brother. He's dark, but I got a brother that light skin with green eyes, literally my blood brothers. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, we find that, you know, the difference a little, you know, we all have good and bad hair, light skin, dark skin, things happening. But when it comes down to it, you know, we're in the same boat. There's a riot, everybody's like, oh, no, you're light skin, you can't ride with us. No, it's in the same boat. I'm reminded of the Star Trek episode that was really interesting, where the guys had black on one side and white on the other. And they were the last of their species, and he was at war with the other guy who was black on one side but white on the other. You know? And they were like, and Captain Kirk was like, what's the problem? You look exactly the same. He's got black on the left side, and he's got black on the right. And so they would kill each other. And it was like powerful.
whether you're black, you're white, you're right there in a mess. People have to take food to you.
Back to the issue of black things in art. First of all, I want to applaud you because there's no reason why we can't say it's black on art. The piece is amazing. But 100 years ago, James Porter was writing about this very issue. And black artists were arguing amongst each other and making these personal, professional decisions about whether they should continue classical landscape, and make money like Turner, or whether they should or whether they should do portraiture and include that black image, whether their everyday lives of black people can be portrayed in their work, and whether that is something that's so much about enough to create, number one, and about enough to write about and to exhibit. So these are the issues. I think it's not, we can talk about the racial components of it, but some of it really is back down to dollars and cents. And who gets shown, and who gets sold, and who gets written about. And who gets written about.
If we don't take responsibility for our own economic, survival as artists, if we don't buy and support our own artists, then we'll always be marginalized. If we don't buy and support our own music. Hip hop, we were buying our own music. And then later on, they were like, oh, they're buying their music enough, let's do it as well. If you don't invest in your own culture, then you have no reason to complain when it's usurped from you.
Can I just add one other thing to the comments that were made earlier about black people going and feeling comfortable in museums? I get off at Clinton, Washington. Black people up and down the street. This gallery has been here long time. Long time. Not upstairs, not in the building, tucked away in the back, storefront. So, people are not being prevented from coming to galleries or going to museums. Yes, there are interest barriers and etc. But, Gary's been here a long time. And he's bringing, that was a big event. On 135th, street level. And luckily, we are creating, but there's lots of people who come through, lots of people who are coming, but some people, and I'm talking about the people who should know better, the 30-somethings, the 40-somethings, who have bumped down $250,000, $500,000 for a condo with blank walls. And they'll have Ethan Allen come and match their couch at 3 times what you pay. You're going to charge them
was at the Armory Shelton last year, and myself and a very good friend, we were I was in that line there. The line was so long with, lots of white folks. So I decided, let me come to see if I'm going to see my people. But I come 1, 2, 3, 5. I said, oh my goodness, what's wrong with my people? Why are they not here? We need to come over there and show us that we are powerful, we love arts. We have talent, we have practice in us. Why are you not here?
And I would say, sorry, I was going to add, because part of your question was kind of like, as artists, some of the pieces we create, like boxing, are we boxing ourselves every time? There's definitely an aspect of that, well, one, I think we always deal with creating, because there's that, label of black art, and it's either good or bad or however you want to think about it, what have you. Now, the work I've been creating, for instance, with this piece, when I made this piece, I was at, the first title of the first piece, doing my master's at George Washington University, pretty much all white except for me and one other guy. And it was, I'm purposely naming it My Big Black America. Versus I could name it, just Black America. And if I'm not in the room, you might not know who created it. For me, putting the my and even adding the big, because like the big is the pride, and the my is the ownership, making it Black America. Now you might possibly think, many Black artists did this or not, but if you don't even see travel, you're not knowing who. You wouldn't necessarily know who made this. I think the same thing with this work, and with pretty much with all my works of late. It's the content is always centered and rooted in my Black experience, but I don't necessarily think at this point conceptually like the execution of it isn't necessarily saying racially one way or the other who the creator is. Now personally, when I come to it, it feels Black to me, but that's because it's just like I think with some of Amber's work sometimes when I come to it, I feel it, and therefore it makes me think that it's probably a Black artist. Well, outside of Amber, but you know what I mean. So I think in some cases, my past imagery, like I started off, I was doing, it was Black people in particular, a lot of figurative work, and I think once I began to do abstract work, it kind of lost it lost the line as far as who the creator was. There's aspects and we would feel it, I think, potentially, as a Black person, coming into, we talked about this one time, like, and so, anyway, I think that's part of, something we deal with regularly, and pretty much every time I make work, I also think about, is it accessible? Sometimes I also think about accessibility to others, because it's one thing, like, I think, if you come to a piece and you dismiss it because you don't think you can associate with it, for instance, with me, if I come to an Asian work, well, it looks Asian, I don't really have a huge background knowledge of Asian art, I can appreciate its, quick aesthetic beauty, but I'm not really going to go beyond that, and I want people to be able to kind of come to the work and begin to, engage in it, question it, and so I'm hoping that that's what's taking place. Kind of allow me to do that.
This is purposely in your face. There's subtleties. There's people who just, they're Black artists, they're like, hey, you might not know, but this is what I feel. I love beaches, so maybe this beach, and that's it. Now, as a portrait artist, I get, I don't know if anybody else got asked, but they was like, hey, why you always being Black people? Not that I always do, but they come to me. Not Black people often, but I was on the show and one of the contestants, or other contestants said, why you always being Black person? And I said, look, you can ask me that question as soon as you go up to any of these white artists and ask why they're being white people. I've never heard anybody ask that.
I want to say that, it's like Wes was saying, it is being an abstract artist, being an African American of Caribbean So figurative versus sticking to what your soul, spirit says to you in terms of what medium to execute an artwork. It's a constant dialogue that at least I have with myself. And my abstraction, my connection to color usually wins. But the thing is that I have the right to choose whichever the hell one I want. You know, as long as I can back it up with the context and the technique in my work and the concept behind it, I can do that. Now, does it have its ramifications in the art world? Of course. And you want to talk about money? Because when you're talking about the historical context of your artwork and of your, it's even more, to me, it's like even more apparent than a resume. An actual, like, a lawyer resume or I don't know,
Don't think about lawyers.
Well, my point is that when people are looking at your artistic resume, and they're looking at what type of aesthetics do you use, what type of medium do you use, what are the lineage, can I see the lineage of your work? Because for some reason they want to equate that to how valuable your work should be, as Amber Rose Gordon right now, as I sit here right now. And so when you veer off, when you're looking at from, in terms of a canon, if someone's looking at my canon, Amber Rose Gordon, where I started versus where I am right now, and to project where I'm going to be, whether they should buy my $25 or $50 or $100,000 artwork. It's an interesting dialogue because if you go too far figurative when you're an abstract artist, what do you have to support that Amber Rose Gordon in your past? I mean, and it sounds arbitrary if you don't have an art background, but it's a stupid, stinky dialogue that does happen. But the most important thing, like I said, is that, at least in my opinion, is that as long as I am able to back it conceptually, technique, and support it, then it is my choice. You know, the ramifications, they're on me. But most importantly, I think it's a choice. It's a very, because I was in on the dialogue when Mikhail was trying to figure out what to name the exhibit. It's a choice. And as a curator, I was at one point president of Organization called Black Artists in DC. And one of the things I started curating with Black Artists in DC in 2005. And several of our exhibits had black, the word black. And I have to admit, I got tired of hearing black in our exhibits. But there's a social awareness that I think artists, and artists of any culture that still have work to do in the U.S. Your peoples are not being treated the way that you need them to be treated. Your child, if you're worried about the way that your child is going to be looked at when he's 16, 14, 20-something, and you are an artist and I think you have a social responsibility to figure out how to do it. It might not come out in your art. It might come out in your community practice, and that's fine. But I think all of us, or I like to think that I'm trying to do it in some aspect. You might not always see it in my work, and that just might be what you bring into my work in terms of your construct. But I think it should be part of art. Whether it be our first artwork, whether it be our community influence, whether it be who you're volunteering for. Look outside, look what our children are dealing with.
She can do an abstract piece that anyone look at it and say, hey, it's nothing to do with being black. But as soon as a little black girl sees that she produces that and can connect the artist with that work, then possibilities open up. They say, oh, I can do that. You know, I can, show me. This is something just by infusing her in that equation, in that discussion. That's a big part of having that responsibility.
And to further address your conversation about placing ourselves in a box, I don't feel personally, I don't feel that we should feel that burden of placing ourselves in a box. It's like Rob said before, when artists of other ethnic groups place create works and it is a signifier of their cultural index, it's Black America is a part of the American experience. It could be called my big white America. It could be called my big Asian America. It could be called my big Black America. But this is just a conversation about how this experience or this particular fraction of the American experience is a part of the American experience. And it's not the only part of the American experience, but it's the one that the artists in this group represent. And that this should also be a part of the artistic conversation that nobody should have a problem talking about. So that's, I guess, the goals, that's my overall perspective.
And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate you taking the Sunday time out.
And thank you for Charlotte, and Shammy, and Charlotte and Sammy.
All of our professionals. And just thank you guys again for being here and for discussing. It's so cool. And on the session about art community and galleries, people forget that galleries are free resources. Before you go to new artwork, before it's in the museum, before you have to pay admission for it, galleries are free. A lot of them do programming like this. Check them out, and I thank you for being here. But